So here's a wild thought. What if the two biggest forces that seem to be fighting for control of our future, the one that's all about data and science, and the other that's all about returning to a mythic past, what if they aren't really enemies at all? What if they're actually secretly building the exact same world?
Okay, so this whole mind-bending idea comes from some incredible work by Kristen Jones. She's an education researcher, been in the field for about 25 years, and she has uncovered this really strange political convergence that she argues is flying completely under the radar for most of us. All right, let's set the stage. On one side of the ring, you've got technocracy, and in the other corner, esoteric traditionalism. And, just looking at them, you'd think there's no way these two could ever agree on anything.
I mean, the contrast is just so stark, right? Technocracy is all about a future built on cold, hard data. It's about progress, secular systems, and bureaucratic management, a world of pure reason. But then you have esoteric traditionalism, which looks backward. It speaks in myths and symbols. It doesn't see history as a straight line forward, but as these grand cycles of decline and, you guessed it, heroic return. On paper, these two are mortal enemies.
But here's where it gets interesting. Here's the twist. What if that whole conflict we see on the surface is just a distraction? What if you ignore what they say and instead look at the kind of power structure they both want to build? Because that's when things start to look, eerily similar.
So it really makes you stop and ask the question, are they actually fighting each other, or is there something else going on here, something bigger that we're missing?
And this is where you just can't deny the overlap. Just look at their political endgames. Technocracy wants centralized administrative power. Traditionalism wants a centralized civilizational state. Technocrats talk about a managed population. Traditionalists talk about a mobilized population. One has its elite expertise, the other has its elite initiatory class. You see, the words are different, but the blueprint is identical. Top-down, centralized control.
This really brings us to the most important point, and it's summed up perfectly in this quote. The rhetoric differs, the architecture of power converges. It's not about the stories they tell us, it's about the house they're building. And it turns out they're both working from the exact same set of blueprints.
So you have to be asking, how on earth does that happen? How can two ideologies that seem to despise each other both end up walking to the same exact spot? Well, it's because they share this kind of hidden blueprint, a few key structural moves that guide them both to the same destination.
So shared move number one, they both get rid of the idea of a stable, independent human nature. To the technocrat, you're just a collection of behaviors that need to be tweaked and optimized by the system. To the traditionalist, you're basically a vessel for some grand mythic destiny. See the pattern? In both worldviews, you, the individual person, become a tool for something bigger.
The second move is that they both value constant change and chaos over a stable reality. For both of them, instability is actually useful. A technocrat sees a crisis as the perfect excuse to redesign the system and grab more control. A traditionalist sees that same crisis as a purifying fire that's necessary for rebirth. So for both, chaos isn't really a problem to solve. It's a golden opportunity to push their agenda. And their final big move is all about narrative control. Both systems want to take truth away from the average person. Their argument is basically, look, reality is way too complicated for you to get on your own. You need their special experts, whether that's a super smart algorithm or an initiated, heroic leader, to tell you what's really going on.
Okay, so what's the real root cause of this bizarre alliance? Well, Kristen Jones argues that this isn't just some new political fad. No, it's actually a symptom of a much, much deeper philosophical shift that's been building for a really long time.
And it all comes back to the slow decline of an idea called classical realism. Now, this is basically the old-school Western idea that reality and human nature are real, stable things that we can actually know. And this is the crucial part. Because those things were seen as stable, it meant there were real, concrete limits on what political power could or should be allowed to do. In other words, nature comes first, and our political systems have to work around it, not the other way around.
So what happens when that foundation of classical realism starts to crumble? It creates a vacuum, and this analysis just nails the result. When metaphysics collapses, myth rushes in. Because when people are in that vacuum, when they feel like they've lost a sense of shared meaning, they're not going to go look for a dense philosophy textbook. They feel lost. They are desperate for a story, any story, that makes sense of all the chaos around them.
And then you take that dynamic, and you pour the rocket fuel of modern digital technology all over it. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already smoldering.
The source material points out this incredibly powerful digital feedback loop. Think about it. Stories about crisis get the most clicks, the most engagement. The algorithms see this and go, oh, people like this, so they push it to even more people. All that visibility makes the crisis feel even bigger and more real, which, in turn, makes us much more willing to accept the radical solutions that both the technocrats and the mythmakers are selling. And then you add artificial intelligence to the mix, and the whole process just goes into hyperdrive. AI can scale these mythic stories at machine speed. It can personalize them to poke at our deepest psychological buttons. It creates this kind of synthetic coherence, making a really messy world feel simple and clean, and it optimizes everything for maximum outrage. It's industrial-scale myth-making. So if we're just bouncing back and forth between these two poles, a world of total management and a world of total mobilization, what's the way out? What is the real fight that we should actually be paying attention to? And this is the core takeaway. The real conflict isn't technocracy versus traditionalism. That's a false choice, and it's meant to keep us distracted. The real fight is between both of those ideologies and the very idea of a stable, grounded reality that puts limits on power.
According to this analysis, the only way forward that's actually stable is to recover these fundamental principles. We have to start asking the big questions again. What does it actually mean to be human? What is reality? What are we here for? How do we know what's true? And what are the rightful limits of law and power? Without that solid ground, all of our politics just becomes a kind of empty theater.
Which leaves us with one last, really big thought to chew on. What if the real choice we're facing isn't between a future run by algorithms and a past defined by heroes, but between both of those dead ends and a return to a deeper, more grounded, and more human reality?